is Alex.
Could be.
Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 24th of July, 2019, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, self, Brian Gerrish, and we should be joined by Alex Thomson. We'll see how that connection goes.
Hopefully.
A black day for the country.
Well, indeed. I mean, I have to say, I sort of feel like the same type of response from people as we had in 2016 following the referendum, Brian, and I get the feeling that there's lots of people, once again, extending lots of hope in this particular man. And I just wonder whether that is misplaced or not. I suspect it absolutely is.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's misplaced. I mean, what has he done? He's cut his hair. That's an important thing to, so that we try and forget how he has looked over the past several years. He's put on a new, smarter suit. Now he's going to project the clean image, but it's actually the same dirty Boris Johnson that we've seen in action over many years.
Well, let's just have a quick listen.
And on the whole, in the last 200 years, it is we Conservatives who have understood best how to encourage those instincts to work together in harmony to promote the good of the whole country. And today, at this pivotal moment in our history, we again have to reconcile two sets of instincts, two noble sets of instincts, between the deep desire for friendship and free trade and mutual support in security and defence between Britain and our European partners, and the simultaneous desire, equally deep and heartfelt, for democratic self-government in this country.
So maybe we could bring Alex Thomson onto the programme now. Alex, what are your thoughts about what Boris just said and his position? Because as we'll see the type of people that he seems to be choosing to have around him in a second. But he was pretty much taking the position that we've got to deal with people that are pro-Brexit, people that are pro-Remain, and find a way through the middle, which isn't really what I think he was saying in the run-up to having won this leadership election.
I think, Mike, that's absolutely the case. If you look at the people who on Twitter have said that they are pro-Boris, and the groundswell of roughly right-of-centre people that's developed on Twitter in particular, people have assumed that he is a kind of British Trump. A kind of Britain first character and Brexit all the way. But as no shortage of commentators here on the continent have said, Mr. Johnson took a jolly long time to work out his position on Brexit before, during and after, in some ways, the referendum of 2016. And I think his defeated rival, Mr. Hunt, was the chameleon who will take his cue from the deep state. Mr. Johnson is much more the opportunist. He's got that elite education, which is all about aping the requirements of the deep state and the public. That's what makes him the stronger character. Patience of flexibility in his disingenuous stance.
Well, I mean, many people commentating on this so far have made the point that Theresa May was the reason that she made such a hash of things was that she was not a very good communicator, not able to bring the people along with her, and that Boris is much more, because he is this affable buffoon character, much more likely to be able to communicate directly with people and bring them along, no matter what he's bringing them along to. I'm not quite sure what his destination is, because as you say, prior to the referendum, he was absolutely on board with what David Cameron was doing in staying within the EU. But let's just briefly have a quick look at the people that the mainstream media at least think are going to go into various positions. So various mainstream media outlets suggesting that Priti Patel, who we'll see a little bit later in the programme, is likely to end up as Home Secretary. Jeremy Hunt as defence. Well, he's just started this process of a European naval force, which Alex is going to talk about a little bit later on. So perhaps that's exactly the right type of person to have in defence. Gavin Williamson back in the cabinet. Some people speculating that he's going to end up with Northern Ireland. So that's a successful return to the cabinet for him. And Sajid Javid as Chancellor. But I wanted to have a look at some of the other people that he has around him. So some of the non-cabinet jobs. So here is, this article was originally from 2016. but this is his new business advisor to be. So this is a guy called Andrew Griffith. He was Sky's COO and Chief Financial Officer, and he is going to be heading over to become Boris's business advisor in an attempt to sort of rebuild relations with the business community following some of the statements that he made in the run-up to over the last couple of years on this. Who else have we got here? Munira Mirza. She was deputy mayor while Boris Johnson was in Mayor of London, and she is going to become the head of Number 10's policy unit. Now, if anybody's watched Yes, Prime Minister, I can't remember the name of the female character in that, but I think if you think back to the Yes, Prime Minister, this is a position that she will take, and undoubtedly will be head to head with Mark Sedwill, so she has been a critic of Theresa May in the past, but he's bringing her in as head of the policy unit. Who have we got here? This is Mark Spencer. He is a Tory politician, member of Parliament for Sherwood since 2010. He has actually been made the chief whip, so he's going to discover all the dirty secrets of all the various Tory members of Parliament. But he has been a bit of a controversial figure himself in the past. In 2015, he suggested that a man with learning difficulties who'd been left without his benefits under benefits sanctions because he arrived 4 minutes late at the benefits office, that this man with learning difficulties should learn the discipline of timekeeping. Well, he was criticised for that at the time. In 2016, he was one of 72 MPs who voted down an amendment in Parliament on rental homes being fit for human habitation, while he himself was a landlord. And in May 2016, he was one of a number of Tory MPs who were investigated by police for overspending the amount of money that they were allowed to spend during the 2015 election. So maybe he's the perfect person to be the chief whip and make sure that all other Tory MPs follow the rules. And then we have this guy who I'm hoping to get some comment from Alex on. This is David Frost. He's a career diplomat. He was head of Europe at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. He's a former special advisor to Boris Johnson while he was Foreign Secretary. He's currently chief executive of the London Chamber of Commerce. But as I say, many years working with the EU. So what job has he got? He is likely to be Boris Johnson's next Brexit negotiator. Perfect person for that. He was at one point, I think he is no longer, a member of the advisory council of the think tank the Open Europe. This is notionally at least a Brexit think tank. They say of him that he was recently the UK's most senior trade diplomat as Director for Europe, Trade and International Affairs at the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills. His permanent career was in the Foreign Office, where he was inter alia Director of Policy Planning and a Director for the EU. Overseas, he has served as HM Ambassador to Denmark at the British Embassy in Paris, UK Permanent Representative to the EU in Brussels, UK Mission to the UN in New York, and in 2013 he left to become Chief Executive of the Scotch Whisky Association, and he was at that point a member of Open Europe's Advisory Council. But as you can see on screen there, he wrote this paper, How to Manage the Renegotiation, how EU renegotiation will happen and how to pursue it. So this was all about David Cameron's renegotiation with the EU, which took place in 2015 and led up to the referendum. So again, this is a guy that's coming from a position of notionally not being in opposition to what David Cameron was doing at the time. So I'm not entirely convinced that this guy is a Brexiteer as such. No. He's a bit like Boris. He's one of these people that has gone from one side to the other. I don't know if you know the name, Alex, or what your thoughts are on our potential new negotiator with the European Union.
I have only vaguely come across Mr. Frost, and I'm more familiar with the pattern that he represents than with him personally. Some of the Foreign Office wonks of my day would bandy about this phrase, UK PLC. We will see what UK PLC can bring to bear on the issues of the EU or conflict resolution further afield. I used to think that they meant Britain as a ship-shape company model, as in the government, but no, it doesn't mean that. It means the leading corporations. The same thing as the security service is referring to when it talks about A-list companies, or increasingly GCHQ's spin-off arm, the NCSC, has the same idea. The key corporations, Mike, is all that draws together the roles that you've just outlined. The key corporations have their placemen and placewomen who are there to secure the interests of that corporatocratic class. And I think that's what Mr. Frost has been doing in his career that you outlined there. He's been in all the juicy perm rep seats in all the major Western capitals, but he's talking in terms of corporations doing diplomacy with supranational bodies rather than nation to nation or people to people. And I don't know whether to be more horrified by that or by the lineup of potential put on screen first, where apparently Israel is going to be in charge of our homeland security through the person of Priti Patel, the West Bank explorer, and Deutsche Bank, on the verge of popping its derivatives bubble, is going to have control of the treasury. Well, it perhaps de facto already does. All these fault lines down between Britain and continent, or between fiscal and financial, indicate that Britain is not actually interested in the kind of government that Mr. Johnson has been putting out that he wants. It's interested in controlling the continent and perhaps even bringing about crises to knock down unfortunate boundaries.
Well, it's interesting that you mention Europe, because here we have Haaretz. Their analysis of Boris Johnson is that he will be the weakest British leader ever. But their subheadline is the Conservative politician, maybe the most pro-Israel Prime Minister in history. But the UK has never wielded less power on the world stage. And as a sort of sideline to this, they have another article today. Boris Johnson's sister reveals his little-known past as a volunteer on an Israeli kibbutz. So the Israeli press, at least, trying to reinforce Boris Johnson's pro-Israeli credentials. But the question, if we go back to that original Haaretz article there, Alex, do you think Britain has actually lost its standing in the world, or is it just playing a slightly different, more duplicitous game, a more soft power game?
Yes, it's before the age of where we were playing the balance of powers, which really began in the late 17th century. We're going beyond that to a kind of cultural transmogrification where the territory doesn't even make much difference to the rulers. So you can have continental people from other continents, even in the lead of our business and government worlds, but they're speaking about Britain in terms of being an influencer rather than a military power or a set of values to stand up for. Interestingly, I heard a rather well-educated sounding young lady on a Dutch train the other day when Johnson's candidature appeared in the bag, saying, "What a shame, he's such a dumb man." And I didn't bother to intervene and ask her whether she'd actually heard his speeches firsthand, but quite certainly she hasn't, although most educated Dutch people can kind of follow a speech in English. They won't have had the opportunity. What she's talking about is how the Dutch media have spun it. So Johnson, perhaps he would welcome this. He's got across the idea that he's a buffoon who just follows populist leads. But if you look at how shrewdly he's put together his advisors there, nothing could be further from the truth. He's very canny.
Very, very canny in a dangerous way, I would say. I think this is extremely dangerous for UK that Boris Johnson's in there. He acts the buffoon, but behind the scenes dangerous politically in every sphere. That's my personal opinion. But on the subject of Israel, I found it fascinating that cruising the internet this morning, what popped up on the BBC was more cartoon, but this time it was this little clip here. If we can just pop that one up, which is what is Zionism? A very brief history. Now, this is part of increasing BBC cartoon time for adults. And we had a little cartoon clip about everything nice to do with Zionism. I called it misleading by omission because it was really what it doesn't say in that film clip that does the damage. But fascinating that at a time the BBC is going for the Labour Party and Corbyn over supposedly anti-Semitism, that we get this cropping up in the BBC. Encourage people to have a look at it. You can decide whether I'm right or not. But I think this is part of the BBC's brainwashing. We're to believe a cartoon about what Zionism is. But the reality, of course, with Boris Johnson is that Britain now has a Prime Minister it deserves. This is a man who believes that money spent on investigating child abuse has been spaffed or ejaculated up the wall. I think we need to use the language. We need to say what this man actually said, what he meant, because this takes us inside the mind of Britain's new Prime Minister. And if he feels this, which he clearly does because he said it live on LBC radio, we cannot trust him on anything he's going to do.
No, absolutely. So Priti Patel then, I do apologise for not putting her name on this, but she was giving some commentary this morning about Boris, and she said, well, look, I believe fundamentally as someone that campaigned to leave in the Brexit referendum that we must all get behind our new leader, our new Prime Minister, and deliver Brexit. I think that's extremely unlikely that that's going to happen. Even Nigel Farage was offering some scepticism this morning. However, what he said was there is a possibility an electoral pact could be forged, but we would need to believe them. And at this moment, that's not very easy. So even he was this morning being slightly skeptical about whether Boris was going to be able to deliver on his promises in the run-up. But the man who is running his show as he decides who's going to have alongside him, and that is Matt Hancock, has said we are not going to have an electoral pact with any other party. So any desire by the Brexit party, because they're basically saying that the only way probably that we can succeed in getting Brexit done is to have a general election at this point, and that if there was a general election, then they would be happy to enter into an electoral pact with the Tory party. Matt Hancock absolutely saying that is not going to be the case. But the other thing just to note here before we move on is that we did, in the video clip, Boris Johnson did mention the fact that he was still clearly thinking in terms of pan-European defence and security. But apparently in light of the recent Hormuz incident and the press stories about the fact that the Royal Navy was not able to protect this particular tanker, he has apparently pledged to the 1922 committee yesterday that he would commit to building more warships. So
well, that'll be a solution in 10 years' time. The key bit is, Mike, we haven't got the assets now to do the job if we believe that what's happening with Iran is real, which I don't. So this is more jam tomorrow. This is what they continually talk about.
Absolutely.
It's nonsense.
Yep. Now, just a quick reminder, if you like what the UK column's doing and you'd like to support us, then please head over to ukcolumn.org/community. Your help would be much appreciated, and it is needed. So get over there if you possibly can and join us. And a quick reminder that Alternative View 10.1 taking place on the 27th of October. As we say, as we've been saying, the tickets are going fast on this. So if you want to get to that, then you probably need to organise that soon. Details at alternativeview.co.uk.
And that's very interesting. Sunday, the 27th of October. So we've got here Saturday, the 27th of July at the Royal Seven Stars Hotel is a talk on protecting our green movement. Now, this is the start of something very interesting which is going on in Totnes, which is people are beginning to question the established green movement and ask, what is it really doing? 5G has been a key part of this, in that people are asking how so-called green movements can also support 5G. So this is the talk: 5G, smart grid, artificial intelligence and electric cars. Can they really be the answer to our environmental crisis? What is the Green New Deal? And exploring the implementation of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, had been hoped that Rosa Koya would be speaking, but unfortunately we have just learnt that she's unable to speak. That would have been live streamed from the US, so that's very unfortunate. But Sandy Adams and Justin Walker will be talking, and I think this is going to be a very interesting talk.
Okay, Alex, let's head on to defence matters. Who has made China a defence export giant?
Well, we have in the West, I think, and particularly in the US. So here we have from Breaking Defense a review of the 50 14 largest defense exporting companies, and a shock horror, 6 of them come from the People's Republic of China. And as you can see here, they're referring to the fact that the US Defense Intelligence Agency is worried about the unanimity, the speed with which the People's Republic of China, with its totalitarian government, of course, can order defense to swing behind new orders. But I think the key thing that has been highlighted there in the upper paragraph of what I put on the slide is that some of the huge, I'm quoting here from Breaking Defense, some of the huge technological strides that Beijing has been made recently come as the result of rules that require, and this is what Russia does as well with joint stock companies, you have to have a partner in the country, rules that require foreign companies to share their technological expertise in exchange for access to China's vast market. Using those technologies combined with a willingness to spend has allowed Chinese defense companies to grow at an astounding rate. You could call it the Thucydides dilemma. The current hegemon allows the second power to rise or die, or is inevitable. But here you've got the sharp end of it. You've got companies which are listed usually in Manhattan or the City of London, very interested in doing business for military and non-military business in China, quite from the dotted line to let a Chinese company basically nick their technology and then start selling it themselves. And I think that makes sense of the following items that we have here. First of all, from Defense One, which is more of a commenting site, we've got a rather young lady. The bottom of the screen gives her name. I can't quite see it on due to the font size.
Elsa
Kania, yes. She seems to write a series of think pieces about preparing for total war and conflict with China and not much else. But the title of her article is The US is Unprepared to Mobilize for, here comes an ominous phrase, Great Power Conflict. That sounds like World War III to me. And then the section of the article at the bottom, which is important, is where she says, prepare for whole of nation mobilization. Several of Mrs. Kania's articles refer to this Chinese concept and say the US now needs to copy it, and people can freeze the screen and read the text. But the bit that she's getting at there is basically having gently suggested that people could sign up in a revamped US selective service, which is the drafts. People could sign up and say, I'm prepared to go on the front lines quickly. She then says, well, actually, we need certain key corporations to be equally involved in public-private partnerships for mobilization, and not just the government agencies themselves. Sounds to me like companies are going to be swung into, well, it's an overused word these days, but it's technically accurate here, a fascist model where corporations do battle through the government. And then we take a... Yes, go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Alex. But sorry, where corporations do battle with the government, but increasingly government requiring corporations to not do battle with each other. So any competition between these corporations in the defense realm, at least, is removed because they're increasingly having to operate as cartels.
Well, I think the series of articles we're going to go through now illustrates cartelism to a T, Mike, because the number of nation states that are on board with some of these corporations is astonishing. And these are nations which supposedly are on opposing sides in military alliances. So we're calling this one the Blob Coagulates. This is 2 articles from Defense News from a series that they have put together Friday of the Atlantic at the moment, an annual review they do of the 100 key defense companies around the world. On the left, we have Rheinmetall, which is also well into Australian manufacturing for defense now as well. Rheinmetall is now buying up Telford, and British Aerospace, as was BAE Systems, has a plant at Telford which produces effectively all of Britain's armoured vehicle capacity, and Rheinmetall is taking a majority stake. They're quoting anonymous sources. Interesting, they don't want to be quoted with their names, saying they wouldn't be surprised if the government would nudge BAE to move further out of that market, allowing this German company to basically run all of Britain's armoured vehicle facilities in Britain. And I'll read a bit of that. It says BAE continues to operate significant armoured vehicle businesses. So this is the other part, right? So this is what BAE, supposedly a British company, is doing. While they're selling out to the Germans in Britain, in Telford, BAE continues to operate these armoured vehicle businesses in Sweden and the US, and has a share of Turkish manufacturer FNSS. Now, as for this joint venture, it will include the British Army's in-service vehicles, but not the munitions and weapons activities. And you'd think, phew, that's safe. We still have that in-house in Britain. No, we don't, because it then says that the CTAI 40mm cannon is a joint effort with a French company, Nexter. And then the key paragraph, I think, is BAE's armoured vehicle business in Britain has been in decline for years, partly because the British government policy largely aimed at breaking the British company's hold on the market. Yes, you've read that correctly. The British government pursued policies aimed at breaking a British company's hold on the British defence market. This strategy, says Defence News, has altered the face of the British industry landscape. And the latest joint venture deal effectively puts control of Britain's entire mainstream armoured vehicle design and manufacturing capabilities in foreign hands, with Rheinmetall joining General Dynamics and Lockheed Martin as the key primes in the British sector. So we've got 2 American and 1 German company controlling Britain's production of armoured vehicles there.
And of course, this is a key aspect of Defence Union, which isn't just about merging military capabilities, it's also about merging the industry. And it's an expression of globalist policy that we've seen for quite a few decades now.
This has gone back several decades, and it seems to be able to withstand the pressures of political disagreements between members of the European Union, for example. The one we didn't have time to cover on the last slide was another example of that, that although France and Italy now have very different governments in terms of their attitude to migration and the currency issue, nevertheless, the French, the Italians, the Germans and the British are all involved in various kinds of naval production. People can go back and read that article also from the Defence News series. And what it leads up to is this. The Cyprus Mail is now reporting that Britain is going on point to win European support for a naval mission. And we should remind people, of course, that UK Column was the first and allowed us to point out that there already is a EUNAVFOR, a European naval force, initially given the task of piracy operations, counter-piracy in the area of the Horn of Africa. But now we have Britain actually going out, and several EU nations are mentioned in this article by the Cyprus Mail as already supporting or being about to swing behind Britain's push for a European naval mission to the Gulf. Including Denmark, which isn't even in the CSDP. It's got a complete opt-out of all the EU's military and defence and security structures.
Well, and indeed, Guy Verhofstadt yesterday was tweeting out how pleased he was to see the British pushing for this and saying that despite Brexit, European-wide defence is still going strong. And we've got to remember that it was Jeremy Hunt who proposed this or was pushing for this. And if he ends up as Defence Minister, then I think we know what direction Defence Union is going to go in. But we should just remind everybody of this situation, which is the Turkey situation. You mentioned Turkey a second ago with respect to what we've just been talking about, Alex. But of course, the big story with Turkey is the denial by the United States of Turkey having any further part in the F-35 project, so they won't get their F-35 aircraft that they've bought. I presume they'll get a refund on that, but who knows? And they have to stop at the cost of, I think we said on Monday's program, $6 billion to Turkey. They have to stop producing parts for this aircraft. Well, Lockheed Martin today has said that it's working to repatriate parts production back from Turkey. They're going to bring production back to the United States. They said this was in a post-earnings call, as they call it. The chief executive was describing Lockheed Martin's financial situation. He said, we've been working to wind down the Turkish industry involvement, and so we have a timeline that we're working towards. It's out through March of 2020 that we think that this will be resolved. And he said he was very happy, though, that despite all the trouble with Turkey, the company has delivered 29 F-35 aircraft in the past quarter, compared with 25 a year ago. But that's all right. Brian, I asked you before the programme, the F-35 has already been plagued with quality control problems. I can't imagine that Turkish factories that are seeing production wound down because effectively of sanctions put against them by the US government is going to be terribly worried about quality control in the closing weeks and months of their contracts.
Well, you just can't see how that could be true, Mike. Why would a company that's actually going to lose a contract, are they going to be working 100% for the safety on the quality control? I don't think so. It's a shambles.
Yeah, it is a shambles. And Alex, we still have had no comment from the British Ministry of Defence about the status of British F-35s and maintenance and supply of engine parts, which have been coming from Turkey, and Turkey had the contract to maintain F-35 engines. We've still got no comment about what is going to happen in the future with respect to that. So, as we said the other day, we can only assume that the Ministry of Defence has no answer at this point for that question.
And given that situation, I just cannot for the life of me imagine what's being said in the old War Office building in Whitehall, where the MOD civil servants are, because they always like to have a plan C, D, and E for such crucial matters. And yet, there's no ministerial line, so they can't comment. Very, very concerning situation, of course. But you can see, certainly here in Benelux, there is a trend to outsource skilled manufacturing, whether defence or civil, to Turkey. And the companies make no bones about it. It's because the workers will do longer hours for a fraction of the pay. There's nothing in there about the level of skill they have compared with Western European workers. So I'm afraid that's the spirit that's behind this.
Yes. But meanwhile, on the final frontier,
the British and military is well again by defence are joining forces to keep the upper hand in space. And this is Penny Mordaunt, our glorious new Defence Secretary, but for how long, talking about things which he unveiled. I think it was Farnborough is mentioned in this article last week at the air show. So we have Britain and America being a bit quiet about partnerships for satellite production, and particularly there's an area where Britain still dominates. That's the slide you've now put on, which is the small satellite production. There's in areas of just south of London where a lot of our air capacity is, where we have quite a lot of specialists in small payloads, small satellites, and here we have a number of British-US corporations in space. Under the banner of Team Artemis, which is going to launch a constellation of satellites, so a whole network of them, and undertake research into the military potential of small satellites. The British government's current attitude is we would like to be under the radar, not being seen as one of the big hitters, but pulling the strings, in this case by controlling US militarization of space, which of course is a very hot topic. And you're about to move on, I know, to issues of banks and possible collapse. And one of the things that the really smart people have been saying for years, like Daniel Estulin, is that how different strands of elitists there are controlling banks and corporations. They are all saying the only way they're going to solve their model is by going into space and laying claim to the resources because of the need to continue to expand in the bubble so that it doesn't pop.
And quite remarkable, we always say that the news comes together very quickly when we do a UK column news programme. So we just switch across to BBC monitoring and see where that leads us. This was sent through to me this morning with some comment that UK column has reported on BBC monitoring before, but were we aware of this? And what the person was particularly interested in were all of the analysis team of individuals working for BBC monitoring. But what's special about this little crow? Well, they're all involved with rooting out disinformation. So we've got Olga Robinson, no relation to you, of course, Mike.
Absolutely.
She observes the Russian media and analyses the narratives they put out. She also focuses on the use of disinformation techniques within the country. Adam Robinson, I don't know whether those two are related, is a senior journalist and Russian affairs specialist focusing on the narratives and disinformation put out by the Kremlin's outlets on traditional and social media. Yana Luishnevskaya, I'm sure, Alex, you're better at that name than I am, but Yana analyses media and politics in Ukraine with a particular focus on the disinformation that accompanies the media war between Ukraine and Russia. She's an expert on Crimea. And Vitaly Shevchenko, Vitaly is an expert on propaganda, disinformation and media manipulation and a watcher of social media bots and trolls. He's the author of numerous articles on Russia's media scene and politics. There are people specialising in Asia and China, of course, but what the individual thought was interesting was the sheer weight of the focus on Russia. Are you able to tell us, Alex, whether this is an increase in weight on focus on Russia, something changed in recent years, or could we say the BBC monitoring has always, excuse me, put this level of focus on what the Russians are saying and doing?
A decade ago, when there was the funding crisis for BBC Monitoring, when it was still in its Caversham property in Berkshire, there was a substantial but not massive team of translators of Russian. And of course, these are not all Russians. Many of them, as you've illustrated in that last slide, are Ukrainian, which is not to tar them with any negative brush. Of course, Ukrainians have a great spectrum of abilities and opinions like any other nation. But I think what's grown in the last decade, culminating in this, Brian, is this real cluster, particularly of Ukrainian younger journalists who are of a particular political mold, who've spent most of their adult life in Britain. And in fact, a Russian who used to work for BBC, I don't know whether it was monitoring or one of the other branches that was linguistically focused, came out a couple of years ago and wrote in Russian and English a novel describing what it's like to walk the corridors of these BBC Russian-focused outfits, and finding that you try to speak Russian to people from other former Soviet republics, and they're so politicized that they pretend not to understand and insist on talking to you in English. So there's definitely been a pool from which the BBC has been able to fish of jaded and activist, particularly Ukrainian journalists, and I think they are now being brought to the fore. It's perhaps not entirely coincidental that BBC Monitoring now has a London base and has sold its Berkshire property. That often means that you can take a clean broom and restaff the place with people of a new generation and new attitudes.
Right, Alex, thanks for that. Well, let's see where this heads, because as I worked through BBC Monitoring, I was fascinated at some of their partner organisations, clients. So we've got Black Sky, we've got Liverpool John Moores University, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, Oxford Analytica, and of course HM Government, which is one of the key supporters and users of BBC Monitoring. But it was Black Sky that caught my attention. So here's Black Sky, transforming how we look at the planet. And it says Black Sky is the premier global intelligence platform delivering timely, relevant and actionable information on which you can make swift and informed decisions. And how are they doing this? Because they say they're linked into a planned constellation of 60 satellites. They're not there yet, delivering near real-time imagery. So our planned constellation of 60 satellites with many spacecraft on orbit by the end of 2019 provides frequent revisit rates over 90% of the Earth's population. So here we are now starting to see corporate activity in space, but remarkably tied in with the information that BBC Monitoring is producing. And if we have a look at what they say, observe, discover, purchase and download imagery from Black Sky multi-source, high resolution. You can task satellites, analyze with machine learning, predictive algorithms and natural language processing. Black Sky delivers critical geospatial insights. So here we've got the AI coming into it. Act at the end. Black Sky's web-based platform puts a world of information at your fingertip. So all interesting stuff. This was quite an interesting quote that they put up on the site. Knowledge is power. Our vision as an organisation is to live in a world in which knowledge-empowered people can achieve results to overcome global challenges. And where's that come from? Well, that's come from the United Nations Training and Research Organisation, UNITAR. And if you're going to have a look at them, what you quickly discover is that they are absolutely driving Agenda 2030 and links into this organisation, the World Family Organisation, where families are going to be educated into how they should behave and think across the world. So we can see space becoming ever more important for a variety of reasons, not only military.
Absolutely. Now, good news, or is it? Deutsche Bank has experienced a £3.1 billion net loss this year. That's the biggest loss that they have experienced since the fourth quarter of 2008. So they put 3.4 billion pound, 3.4 billion euros, sorry, on strategic transformation charges on their books in the second quarter, which has taken the net loss to 3.1 billion. This is the biggest quarterly loss, it's quarterly loss since the depths of the financial crisis. And of course, they're in the middle of cutting jobs. They're going to cut 18,000 jobs in the next couple of years. And they're, as Alex made the point earlier, they're removing themselves from the investment banking industry and turning themselves into a normal retail bank if they possibly can, because of course they hold so much derivatives paper on their books that it's hard to know how this is going to work out in the end. Not well, I suspect. I just thought it would be amusing to have a look and see what the share price has done over the last couple of decades. And as we can see, at the height of their success in 2007, their shares were running at 112 euros each. And since then, it's collapsed to today, €6.89. It's a crying shame, Brian.
It is a shame, particularly as this is one of the banks that was praised by Common Purpose as being a role model for society and future leaders.
Alex, have you got any thoughts on where this leaves Europe in particular in the event that Deutsche Bank does actually end up being flushed down the toilet?
Well, Mike, as we're approaching the end of the news, I shall have to be very thumbnail about it. But yes, I think the best man to approach or to consult on that is Joseph Farrell with his YouTube channel called News and Views from the Nefarium. And Farrell has a very profound understanding of both Germany and Eastern Europe, and has pointed out that Deutsche Bank is, if it goes down, which is actually not inconceivable with the derivative exposure it has, then that's going to burst the Eurozone. There's going to be nothing to ride to their rescue. Even the population of Germany would be too indebted. And I think that the forecasters of the Central European belt, which notably is not just Poland and Hungary now, but also includes Italy, they have been repatriating their gold from London and New York. And they may be on the brink, we must express this as speculation, they may be on the brink of attempting to build a gold-backed currency, or at least currency and export zone with Eurasia. That would be an absolutely massive change. And of course, German industry itself, many of the old families are very keen to ditch the Anglo-American system and do more business eastwards. So it is an extremely significant cusp of change that we're on, I think. That Deutsche Bank was not actually a big investment bank in the past. It's throughout the Germanic zone of Europe here, you have this problem of banks seeing what the Anglo-Americans did in ripping off the world and thinking, as kind of Johnny-come-latelys to the party, we can do that too. But they didn't understand the confidence tricks involved, and so they were rather too earnest about it. And the Dutch and German banks have ended up making royal messes and needing state bailouts. And I think that's the way that Deutsche Bank's probably going to fold. Is it went about it in a too clod-hopping manner. I'm afraid the real finesse of trickery comes from London.
Absolutely. Now, Alex, you sent me this tweet earlier. It's in Dutch, so tell us what it's about.
This is from an account which keeps getting banned on Twitter but resurfacing, called Pedo Pride 2019. And they don't seem to be a satire account, because they say get in touch with us from this email account, and they keep getting re-established. And here they're saying that they're going to participate in Amsterdam Pride this summer. And the translation is children and young people, or teenagers, you could translate it, and those who love them, an old code for pederasty. And here we have 4 categories of people who are going to be represented through Pedo Pride: nepiophiles, pedophiles, hebephiles, and ephebophiles. That means those sexually attracted to infants, to children, to prepubescent and pubescent children and teenagers ought to be part of Pride and ought to be welcome inside the community, i.e. the LGBT community. We will be at Amsterdam Pride this year. And then the final hashtag there is the Children Liberation Front, which isn't the name of an organization. They think that they're part of a social movement to liberate children. So we're back to the 1970s. Tellingly, between 77 and 83, both parliamentarians were trying to introduce effectively repeal of the age of consent, or at least to bring it down to 4 years old. And so we seem to have gone 40 years later back to the same point in the cycle, and they're trying again through this liberation and sexual expression movement to say it's perfectly all right to have sex with very young children.
Yeah, and I think the same thing is going to happen here, without doubt. We shall see. That really brings us to the end of today's news. Alex, thanks very much for joining us. Thank you for viewers and listeners for joining UK Column. We will be back at the same time on Friday.
See you then.
See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.